Dear Chairman, thank you very much for the introduction. It's a great honor today to speak here today at the Slovakian diabetes meeting. It's a great honor for me because we are currently experiencing a period of, I would say, disruptive changes in the diabetes care, in the way how we diagnose, in the way how we develop interventions, in the way how we treat, and in the way how we might in the future prevent diabetes and also lead to a remission of diabetes. Digitalization is changing our ways to get to the patient and also to offer the patient interventions who are addressing his intuitive need. And the wide use of sensor technology is again putting us into a situation to learn more and more about patient risk, comorbidities very early, much earlier than today. And all these aspects together, I would say it's a fascinating period of diabetology, of evolvement of diabetology. And therefore, it's a great honor to talk to you, you who are the real leader in diabetes care, because on a daily basis, you see the patient, you work with the patient, you touch the life and the heart of our people living with diabetes. And I would like to express a very deep gratitude and thank you to you for doing this. I'm Peter Schwarz. I'm the president of the International Diabetes Federation. It's also a great honor to be the president of the International Diabetes Federation. And in the same moment as the diabetology is undergoing disruptive changes, also the International Diabetes Federation is changing and has to adjust to the change of the field in the diabetology. And we are in a process to build up the International Diabetes Federation to become a very strong partner, a very strong voice for the need of people living with diabetes and healthcare professionals who provide high quality care for people living with diabetes. And we could say in Europe, this is important. And we have our issues in Europe. But if we are honest, on a global scale, the prevalence of diabetes in Europe is low and accessibility and availability of diabetes care is on average good. If we go to Southeast Asia, if we go to Africa, the situation is very, very different. And there is an explosion of number of people with diabetes. Especially in Africa, we will experience a tripling of prevalence in the upcoming 10 years and three times more patient, but there's not three times more workforce to treat this patient, to diagnose diabetes. So we need new concepts how to deal with this situation. And in Southeast Asia, we see a different kind of diabetes, much faster, much earlier, very much related to the accumulation of liver fat. And in young, slim persons, an aggressive form of diabetes. So again, to address all this, the International Diabetes Federation is the right body, and we will develop IDF in becoming a very strong partner for all these aspects I just have mentioned. What I would like to do with you is to share some snapshots in the field of diabetology with an IDF perspective. And you have heard about me. Something what is unique is being president of the International Diabetes Federation, the largest NGO in the world with 256 member organizations, being present in every country in the world. This is really a very important and cool organization. And if you forget everything what I say, but take home, we have to work together. We have to work together across specialties in the medical field, with the patient, with stakeholders, with NGOs, with all the partners in your country, in your community, in your hospital, if you really want to provide a good diabetes care. It's not as easy or as simple as um, uh, I apologize for saying, as doing a simple surgery or to repair a broken leg. Here, by addressing the needs of people living with diabetes, we address the life of this people, the life of this patient, the heart of this patient. And this is a different challenge, and cooperation is needed to prevent this. But what is the reality? WHO has released data about number of people living with diabetes on Earth, and they said in 22, 800 million people with diabetes on Earth, 24, actually 830 million. And where are they living? In low and very low income countries. So it's in Southeast Asia, Africa, in the poor countries, we could say, there we see a very fast increase in the gain of number of people living with diabetes. And what we also see, a very fast increase in morbidity, followed by mortality. But kidney disease, cardiovascular disease, comorbidities related to diabetes is much more common than what we see in Europe. And this requires also different approaches. And if the International Diabetes Federation wants to have an impact, it has to have the impact in this environment. Recently, 6 weeks ago, at the World Diabetes Congress, we released the Atlas, the 11th edition of the Diabetes Atlas. And you see here, IDF is talking about 589 million people living with diabetes. You might say, how can WHO and IDF not have the same number? This question is a very good question. We'll come to this later. It's different diagnostic criteria which were used to define how big is the number of people living with diabetes. It makes no sense to have different numbers, and we will address also this issue. But whatever number is correct, the number is far, far, far too high, and we have to act to reduce this number. And again, WHO has actually cool goals how to act on diabetes level, diagnosing them, have a good glycemic control, good blood pressure control, good statin or lipid control. And 100% of people with diabetes should have access to affordable insulin. So the two key points is 100%. I personally believe that 60% of people with type 1 diabetes are not diagnosed today. This 60% mainly die because they are misdiagnosed. They are not diagnosed with a ketoacidosis, for example, in Southeast Asia with malaria, with a mild form of malaria, and then they are treated with as malaria, and the next day the child is dead. This is a big challenge currently in Southeast Asia, and so many of these people who would live with type 1 diabetes are not diagnosed, and this is something we have to tackle. And the second thing is affordable insulin. You might know that some of the big insulin producers are withdrawing the cheap insulin from the global market and to focus on GLP-1 production. And I think this is wrong. We need affordable, accessible insulin to treat people living with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So the situation is a challenge, but we also have to understand where diabetes is coming from. And this picture is something new. It might say where is the next increase in prevalence of diabetes. It's not. It is the prevalence of type 2 diabetes in conjunction with air pollution. So if you stand behind a German diesel car and you take deep breaths, you find medium-sized particles out of the diesel engine 2 days later in your insulin-producing beta cell. Is it, or does it mean anything for diabetes? We don't know, but in cell culture, it impairs insulin secretion by 30%. So air pollution can become a very strong determinant for type 2 diabetes development. We know it is for cardiovascular disease. And we might say it's not a big issue in Europe, but if you're in Mumbai, or if you're in Delhi, or if you are in Nairobi, the situation is very, very different. And this can be a fostering determinant for the development of diabetes. If I ask you, or if I should say, what is the main determinant of diabetes development currently? And today I would say it's the consumption of fried carbs. If you eating fat is not such a big issue. Even eating carbs is not such a big issue. But if you fry carbs at a temperature above 130 degrees, you build bonds between glucose and fat, and the body cannot break them down. Only with a high energy need, he can break down these bonds. But we are eating them, and they are getting stored in the liver and develop Marfeld, NAFLD, MASH, and NASH. And if I would have to decide what is the one main determinant, I would choose this one, beside all the other aspects we know. But in Southeast Asia and in Africa, this is the driver for the development of diabetes. So it's the fried component of the carbs which are the driver. So we have to prevent, and walking 10,000 steps a day or any kind of physical activity is good because a muscle which is used can consume glucose, insulin independent. If you have diabetes and you are physically active, it lowers postprandial blood sugar twice as much as 1,000 milligram metformin are doing. So this is cool, but we are not using the power of physical activity because this is the average step count of a European. Many of us actually walk less than this. And if I ask how many hours per day we are inactive, we are mainly 24 hours a day inactive. But the true diabetology is, I apologize for saying this, is not in our brain as diabetologists. It's not in our prescription. It's in the muscle of our patients. If we would be able to activate this muscle, if we would be able to activate our own muscle, because we often also don't do. And being a good example for our patient could help to solve some of the issues. But we are physicians, we are scientists, pathophysiology is important. And this is healthy. You know, using a sensor has changed our paradigms of understanding type 2 diabetes. And here's a young woman, high normal A1C. She's always green arrows, eating something, but she has a totally flat glucose curve. And she's very insulin sensitive compared to her father having a better A1C than the daughter because the father is eating less carbs, but you immediately see a different curve. And the father is very insulin resistant. So the father presents with this fluctuation of glucose. And this is something we also learned that the fluctuation drive morbidity and mortality of our patients. So imagine two people with an A1C of 7. One has mild fluctuation, the other one has big fluctuations. The one with the big fluctuation gets a stroke and a heart attack. The one with the mild fluctuation may not even need an intensive treatment. And this may change our paradigms of how to treat and prevent diabetes. Problematic is we don't find them. We cannot use a sensor for screening yet. I think in 3 to 5 years, we will have sensors for $1 for 2 weeks, and this will change our approaches. And we will learn much more than only glycemic control by using the glucose curve. We will learn about depression, behavior, cardiovascular risk, and much, much more. And this will be a bright future for diabetology. But the consequence is whatever we do, we should reduce the fluctuation because this is of benefit to the patient. So if you treat your patient, always think about this variation of glucose. And if you lower the variation, you will improve the situation for the patient. Here, the pathophysiology again, development, blue curve, insulin resistance, orange, pro-insulin resistance, and then finally development of hyperglycemia triggered by the development of visceral obesity. And a new player is coming to the game, the hepatic fat. Fat in the liver, 100 grams of fat in the liver makes you becoming a non-responder to physical activity. So you do the physical activity, you walk 10,000 steps and it works only as 2,000 steps. And this is, we all know there's patients who tell us that they do it and we trust them that they do it and we don't see an effect. And probably this is driven by the accumulation of liver fat of more than 100 grams, more than 89 to 94 grams of fat in the liver. Here diabetes starts and here we start treating diabetes. So we come far too late where the beta cells are in the middle of the decompensation. So it's, assume you have a car and the car is 20 years old and you still want to do races with this car, but you never repair it. And then suddenly the car will break down. And this is what is the environment if we start treating our patients with diabetes mellitus. So again, we have to think based on the pathophysiology, what is the appropriate treatment and should think about, can we act earlier to prevent the disease, treat earlier, develop measures to help the patient to lead to a diabetes remission, which would be very, very cool. Finally, the interplay between visceral fat and hepatic fat is driving the development of diabetes. Even if I said the single most aggressive determinant are fried carbs, The pathophysiology is driven by the interplay between visceral fat and hepatic fat. The visceral fat I only can get away in asking a surgeon or in doing physical activity. But now imagine if you also have liver fat and the efficacy of physical activity is low. So you are suddenly, if you accumulate visceral fat plus hepatic fat, you start a devil's cycle where you as diabetes patient basically cannot come out. It doesn't matter what kind of treatment you have, the situation will get worse. So we have to think about to get the visceral fat away and or the hepatic fat away. And by the hepatic fat blocking the breakdown of visceral fat, the hepatic fat should be the first. And if I ask you, I apologize for jumping. If I ask you how to get the hepatic fat away, the answer is very simple and very easy. It's fasting. If you fast for 2 weeks without eating any kilocalorie, yes, and you understood it correctly, 2 weeks eating nothing, only water diet, we could say. You initiate a glucagon release. For the first 3 to 4 days, glucagon is helping to break down glycogen to make glucose level higher. If glycogen is gone, the glucagon helps to break down protein to make glucose out of it, or to break down fat to make ketones out of it. So if you fast and you lay in bed, the glucagon will be used to break down muscle, to make glucose out of it. But if you are physically active during fasting, a muscle which is used is not broken down, and the same hormone glucagon will switch the breakdown of fat, so initiating beta oxidation of fatty acid, breaking down fat to ketone bodies, and the ketones are used for energy metabolism. And where is glucagon present? In the pancreas and the liver. And this was very nicely shown by Taylor, not the pathomechanism by Taylor, but he has seen it in experiment. If you have fat in the liver, you also have it in the pancreas, and this destroys beta cell function. And the opposite works. If you remove the fat out of the liver and you remove it out of the pancreas, you may restore beta cell function. And what is restorative of beta cell function? It's a remission of diabetes, remission of diabetes, remission of diabetes. And a remission of diabetes can be so easy by not eating. And I know everyone thinks, no, it's impossible for 2 weeks not to eat. I did it with more than 1,000 patients with brilliant results. And I think in the 1,000 patients, 990 of them decided themselves to do it. And so the effects, the self-efficacy, the reaching the goal, everything is with the patient. This is a brilliant intervention for self-efficacy for the patient. But let's go ahead. We have to better understand where it's coming from. And I said one of the main determinants are the fried carbs due to the combination of bond between glucose and fat. But there is also another way to accumulate these bonds, and this is by drinking. Here is shown 380,000 patient years, and if you drink one soft drink per day for the period of 1 year, what it does with your diabetes risk. And if you drink water, it's not increasing diabetes risk. If you drink orange juice, 40%, like Coke, 40%, but Diet Coke or Coke Zero is 60%. How can this work? How can the Coke without sugar make more diabetes than the Coke with sugar? And the answer are the artificial sweetener. And the story is the artificial sweetener change our gut microbiome. There are 13 different germs invading our gut. If we consume a certain amount of artificial sweetener, there are 38 artificial sweetener available. 36 of them does the change of the microbiome. And this change of microbiome, we could say, we don't care. It's still bacteria. They help to digest. But this bacteria produce metabolites. These metabolites shown here. And these metabolites, basically is a stool of this bacteria, is a fatty acid built to a bond to a glucose molecule. So it's the same what you generate by frying carbs, you generate in your gut by the changed microbiome. And again, we incorporate this in our body and it's stored in the liver, and then you become a non-responder to physical activity. So this has to change. And this is one of the evidence bases why next to taxes on sugar sweetened items, also the items with artificial sweetener should be taxed in the same way because they are also influence or increasing the diabetes risk. I mentioned that the digitalization will be disruptive, but will help us a lot in better get to the patient and help the patient doing treatment and intervention. Gray, how our drugs lower A1C, green, how lifestyle does, and blue, how digital tools do this. And here you see 2015 and 20, these studies analyzed. And what are these studies? They use smartphone-based apps to analyze the effect on A1C. Now you might say, how can an app on a smartphone lower A1C? It's not a drug. But we are in the pocket of our patient. We never have been so close to our patient than being in the pocket. Every one of us is taking 1,800 decisions every day. 450 are related to our lifestyle. Now imagine if we only influence 10 out of the 450 in the right moment with the right motivational strategy, with the right messaging out of the pocket using the smartphone, influencing 10 from the 450 lifestyle related decisions, but do this over the period of 1 year, we might translate this into 10 kilogram of weight reduction. So modern diabetology might look like this in the future. And there are good examples from Germany, licensed and reimbursed apps. Here is one doing diabetes education out of the pocket of the patient. And another one using AI. You make a photo of your food and it's qualified and quantified what you're eating, but the information is not used to blame you for what you're eating. The information is used to help you to improve the next meal, and also apps using the sensor and doing nutritional coaching for the patient based on the shape of the sensor curve. And developments from Sweden, again, using the sensor and making very clear treatment recommendation based on the curve of the glucose level. In this case, every glucose level is compared to 1,000 other patients as a kind of swarm intelligence. And this app tells the patient today at 6:35, you inject 22 units of long-acting insulin. So it's basically diabetology out of our pocket by using AI and analyzing the shape and the fluctuation and the amplitude of glucose variation measured by any of the available sensors. So I think this is a bright future, and we should not fear this. We also should not fear the use of AI in this field, because not everyone will respond to this. But those people who respond, who have an adherence to this, they can go with these tools. The others who do not, they will sit in our office, and we will have more time to concentrate on those people who classically have the higher risk factors, higher morbidity, and also mortality. I want to come back to the fasting at the end again. We know that eating less is healthy and has multiple good effects. Maybe we can say eating nothing is even more healthy, but eating nothing and you move into ketosis, this is a very beneficial metabolic state, because I would say it's the fastest gain of health by abolishing and removing the fat out of the pancreas and the liver. You lose a lot of body weight, but this should not be the main driver for this. Cleaning the liver and cleaning the pancreas is the main aspect, a reset of the microbiome, and a very cool and challenge for your self-efficacy as a patient. Here you see an AGP of a diabetes, type 2 diabetes patient after fasting, and look at the flat curve. It's similar to the curve I showed you at the beginning from this daughter. So it's basically breaking the roots or breaking the causes of type 2 diabetes on a metabolic level. MRI spectroscopy before the fasting, the 2 weeks water diet. And here you see the cloudy stuff in the liver is the liver fat. And this is after the fasting, and it shows you the effect on the fat in the liver and the pancreas. I think this is a cool intervention, and especially in very low income countries, because it doesn't cost anything if you fast. But also in our environment, this can be a blockbuster in the future. IDF, under my leadership, has initiated a group to develop a guideline on fasting and diabetes. And this is a proposal for the water diet. But in the guideline group, there are 19 different fasting diets which were put together based on the evidence for the recommendation for our type 2 diabetes patient. On a physiological level, this water diet or fasting could gain this physiologically cool way to go ahead and prevent diabetes. The fasting group, here you see the different styles of fasting which will be addressed and is led by Mohamed Hassanain and Daniela Koppold. Both have very extensive experience in the fasting field for people with diabetes. Then there is a new group I have initiated, prevention of obesity and diabetes, is led by Inas Shaltut from Egypt. And they already released a public health program for prevention of obesity and diabetes, which can be used by governments for implementation, and it will be very soon published. There's also a group we have initiated on type 5 diabetes. Yes, you heard it correctly, type 5 diabetes. And this is actually, it's not a new kind of diabetes, but it's a neglected kind of diabetes. 29 years ago, there was a consensus meeting at the WHO and about a malnutrition related diabetes. And these experts couldn't find a consensus. So WHO has taken off this kind of diabetes from the list. But in January this year in Vellore, we had a meeting and discussed this again and again and again. And finally, this type 5 diabetes group was founded as group of the International Diabetes Federation. And they will develop over the next 2 years a guideline on how to diagnose, how to treat, how to prevent, and how to describe type 5 diabetes. But it's not fully a malnutrition related diabetes. It's mainly, I would describe it, protein malnutrition of the mother during pregnancy related diabetes of the offspring, and something which accounts for about 34 million people in Southeast Asia, and the number in Africa is not known. But it's predominantly, we see it there, but we see it also more and more common in our environment. Another group, AI and diabetes, led by Ahmed Gudey, and they will bring together all the quality and evidence and medical evidence-based recommendation for the use of AI in diabetes care. So how we can qualify AI as physicians for the use in our patient. And there is an upcoming collaboration between ADA, ASD, and WHO. Because if you look into the diabetes atlas and the current numbers from WHO, you see a big difference. And the biggest difference is in the diagnostic criteria which were used. But why is it so relevant? Because we have 4 different diagnostic criteria to diagnose diabetes. And the point is, in Europe, it doesn't matter so much because they overlap very well, because most of the studies are done in Europe about this. But if you're in Southeast Asia, the diagnostic criteria do not overlap so much. And this drives the discrepancy. And I think this calls for action to harmonize the standards of diagnosing diabetes on a global scale. One point is there's also the 1-hour glucose becoming more and more interesting and more relevant for in the diabetes sector in many countries in the world. So we have, including 1-hour glucose, 5 approaches to diagnose diabetes, and this makes no sense. We should have one clear standard in diagnosing diabetes. For me, IDF is needed because we need a powerful voice for people living with diabetes. And I think everyone who has diabetes has the right to have the same accessibility and availability of diabetes care and diabetes prevention. And we are far, far, far away from this. As president of IDF, I have 3 goals. I want to be in the diary and the brain of every health politician. I want to be in the pocket of every patient and in the heart of every healthcare professional. In the brain of the politicians, we want to go with the Global Diabetes Index. We will develop an index, assess the quality of diabetes care in every country with about 100,000 patients and physicians every year. And we'll translate this in an index and release it 3 weeks ahead of World Diabetes Day. So everyone can use this information and talk to his stakeholders or politicians. But the politician will see, oh, the quality of diabetes care in my country is like this, and the other country is maybe 10% better. So now we have to change something. Maybe he is ignoring it, but then we do the same survey 2 years later again, and then he might see, oh, the neighboring country is now 12% better, and we are seizing. And then people might ask the politician, why have you not done anything last year already? And this might drive and build a momentum to change. Secondly, being in the pocket of every diabetes patient. Of course, free diabetes education using smartphone-based technology. We will not reach everyone, but we will reach millions more than we reach today. Diabetes education, diabetes education, diabetes education is a big, big gap in many, many countries, including many European countries. And finally, it could look like this, having apps helping the patient to through the diabetes day and helping the patient with targeted diabetes education. Finally, being in the heart of every healthcare provider, we develop a fellowship program, and every one of you is invited to become fellow of the International Diabetes Federation. It will cost a little money, but every education of the IDF School of Diabetes, which will follow in the future a globally standardized curriculum for diabetology, all this training and up-to-date evidence-based training will be free as a fellow of the International Diabetes Federation. So I invite you to become fellow. Go to the IDF website, IDF/fellow, and I would love to see you from Slovakia at this fellowship program. There are many faces of people living with diabetes. Let's work together to put a smile on these faces of people living with diabetes. Social media is important. I invite you to follow the LinkedIn or the Instagram or any of the other channels. The easiest way is using your smartphone now to scan this QR code, and this QR code goes to my WhatsApp channel, and this is the way where I'm reporting about the activities, and I'm also inviting any one of you who has ideas to share their ideas and to help to make IDF stronger and to develop the International Diabetes Federation into a federation where we say, I'm proud to be member. It's my International Diabetes Federation. So I would like to thank you a lot for your enthusiasm, your commitment, your energy in treating people living with diabetes, for your commitment to improve the quality of diabetes care, and your passion for diabetes prevention. Let's act to help our patient to walk away from diabetes. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your action.